Welcome back, everyone, to the Moms Like Me podcast, powered by Support Now. I'm thrilled to invite back our beautiful guest, Ebony Ford. I recorded with Ebony last week, and she is one of the very few people that I said we must do a part two because her story is so rich. There's so many layers, so many chapters, and those chapters continue. And just given how well she articulated everything that she went through with her daughter, Rain, and the complications, her story doesn't end there. And I wanted to give her an opportunity to share further because I think it highlights not just resilience, but really how, as moms, you have choices. You can either choose to say, okay, this is good enough, or you can truly choose to pursue the things that you really want in life, despite how hard it might look. So, Ebony Ford, thank you again for being here. Welcome back. Thrilled to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I feel like we're fast friends here, which I love. And again, you did such an amazing job last time talking about your story with Rain. And, you went through so much with her, the way your birth story and her time in the NICU and then coming home and the complications that you had early on. And yet, despite all of that, you and your husband said, hey, I think we should do that again. So, for those that have had a traumatic birth experience, which you certainly qualify for, talk a little bit about how did you and your husband make the decision that you wanted to grow your family despite the challenges you had faced in the past?
Well, it goes without saying we're gluttons for punishment, obviously, but we knew really early on we wanted a big family. He is one of two. I am an only child on one side, and I didn't get siblings until I was an adult on the other side. And so I knew we wanted more. And we sat down and we started talking about what's the worst that can happen? Could we live with that same outcome again? Could we navigate that again? Because truth is, those who have preeclampsia or HELLP syndrome, you are extremely likely to have it again. But I also knew many women who had perfect second pregnancies. And so we decided first to mitigate some of my risk factors. I have an autoimmune condition, so we made sure that was in a bit of remission. I lost some weight, supplements, I did a bunch of things to just kind of get me well where I felt comfortable. And then we knew that if we were going to proceed, we had to find a different medical team. So then that's where the advocacy part of me kicked in and started researching. But yes, we knew, and we knew that those were things we had to do before we tried again.
I mean, it's just crazy because you truly almost died. And yet, that consequence of knowing that you were likely to have HELLP syndrome again, you were likely to have a lot of these same things. I could see many people coming to a different interpretation of what happened.
Yeah.
What truly motivated you to grow your family? Like, what was it? Is it religious? Is it spiritual? Is it like, I just don't feel complete? Is it, I want a boy? Like, what was it?
The short answer is legacy. The decisions that I've made from, I'd say 25 on, have all been motivated by legacy. I knew that, sure, my daughter could carry on our family legacy. I knew she'd have one of her own, but I did not feel as if it were complete. Our
Mm.
family just it didn't feel complete. And sure, we could have gone the realm of adoption and all the other things, but I felt like we had a son coming. I
Mhm.
felt it. I felt it in my gut. I started dreaming about it. I started seeing this little boy with big curly hair and gray eyes, and he was like the splitting image of my son. I saw it. And my husband too was like, "Man, I would love a son." And so we sat with it. We prayed about it because we are spiritual, and we felt peace. So we proceeded in knowing our history. Our history is that although it was not a great ride, we survived it and we were kept through it. And we knew that there was no risk of our history failing. And history is we've survived 100% of what we've already gone through. So why wouldn't we survive this too?
I love that so much. So you mentioned this earlier. I want to touch back on this. So clearly, the decision was we must find a new medical team. What was the due diligence process like for you to find the right doctors, to find the right practice that understood your history, understood the risk? How do you assess, who could be good for you this second time around or this next time around rather?
So I'm fortunate enough to be a part of the Maryland Mortality Review Board. And so I get to see cases of women who die in pregnancy and up to a year after.
Oh,
And so that gives me access to some CDC information, some Maryland Department of Health information. And so I can kind of see where things are happening in my state. There was a new facility that had just been built. And I wanted to just look into this. I'd never used this particular medical system before. And so I looked into it. I looked into the C-section rates. I looked into all of those things and just decided to give it a go. Just call and see if they were accepting patients, and they were. And I took my medical records, my complete records from my pregnancy with my daughter up until about 3 months postpartum. I took all of that, got it condensed, and made a preconception appointment. Little did I know I was already pregnant.
Oh,
But I made a preconception appointment, and it just so happened that the doctor that I could schedule with was amazing. He was not new to that practice. He had 30 years in the game. I never had a male physician before. And it just so happened that all the pieces aligned, that I had a team that looked like me. More
Mhm.
specifically, that looked like my father. I had an all male Black team. That does not happen.
Wow.
MFM, midwife, OB, it just doesn't happen. And so it felt like all the stars aligned for something different.
Wow.
And people often said, "Did you seek out that?" And I said, "No, I did. I actually didn't. It aligned." And when I went into the meeting with him, he grabbed the MFM to talk to me. The MFM grabbed the midwife, and then we all just sat there and talked. And they went through and just said, "Oh, well, I would have done this. Okay, well, when you presented with this, I would have admitted you that day. You would have never gotten on the plane.
Yeah.
I would have tried to keep you pregnant until 32 weeks at minimum." They all just kind of said the different things that they would have done. And so I told them I would, get back with them. And then 2 weeks later, I got a positive pregnancy test. And I called back like, "Hey, I guess I'm gonna see you a little sooner than I thought because we're pregnant." And I had such a peace with this team. And I think it goes to mention that I had a lot of medical trauma at this point.
Yeah.
I was not very trusting of physicians or the medical system at all. Being an advocate, I had to associate because of the hospitals that I was affiliated with, but I had quite a bit of trauma, and I felt such peace in their hands. I felt like I was their daughter, their wife, their niece. That's the kind of care that I got. And so I tell everyone, please, you may not have access to the more specific information that I do, but it does not hurt to take medical records or to sit down with them before you commit to a physician's practice and ask them what their policies are on, VBACs, C-sections. What are your protocols? Can you accommodate this birth plan? We know birth plans don't typically go according to plan, but should it? Could you accommodate this? What would you do? Where do you deliver? To look into that hospital because those hospital things are very public knowledge.
Right.
It doesn't hurt to look into and to make sure that you feel at peace. And if you don't feel at peace, I tell everyone, draw back and start over.
Well, and I think that while you had so much trauma, certainly, there had to be some level of confidence because you knew what you were predisposed to. So you knew you could ask the right questions. And I feel like the nugget of knowledge in there for pregnant women is if you know you're predisposed to anything, whether that's because of your family history, genetics, race, whatever it might be. Use AI to understand like, okay, what are the most likely outcomes based off of, my history, my family background, et cetera, so that I can come in and ask the right questions because so many people go through the process just assuming, well, everyone does this, so it must not be that complicated, when in fact it can be extremely complicated depending
Yeah.
on your situation. So I would imagine it was a very interesting balance for you both to have the trauma, yet the confidence because you're asking the right questions these times. You know what worst case scenario looks like, so you can work backwards from there. Did that confidence influence you like later stage in your pregnancy? Like, did you get nervous in your second and third trimester? Kind of what was your headspace like with him when you were pregnant?
Actually, very nervous in the beginning
Okay.
because I experienced a lot of bleeding with my son, a lot. And I did not have that with my daughter. I bled halfway into my second trimester. And so there were a lot of ER visits. I knew that I had fibroids. What I did not know was that my son's placenta had actually implanted over one of the largest ones. And so it was getting irritated, which was causing that. And so any pregnant woman bleeding, you're like, everybody freaks out. So I had a lot of anxiety in the beginning. But again, my team was incredible. Every time I called, come in, get an ultrasound, come in, come in, come in. They even shipped me a Doppler because he
Wow.
trusted me to use it. They typically tell you don't because most people don't know how to find a
Freak
heartbeat,
out.
but he,
Yeah,
he
like, "Go
trusted
find a
me.
baby." Yeah.
Yeah, he trusted me too because I did it in the office with him. And so they were just really great on reassuring me. My next big milestone was 26 weeks. I had to beat 26 weeks. I had to. And I did it effortlessly. No bed rest. I would say I kind of set myself down,
Mhm.
but no bed rest. I did as I pleased. I had no reason not to. I had great energy. I
Mm.
wasn't sick, no morning sickness, nothing. And so when I hit 26 weeks, it was like a huge celebration. Like, man, that 26 weeks and 6 days, making it one day past the last, huge celebration.
I bet.
And after that, I was like, okay, I got this. I got this. At least he'll be one day further in gestation than her. Like, we did it. We beat it. And then 27 weeks came, and then 28 weeks came, and then midway through 28 weeks is when the blood pressures started getting crazy. And that's when I got a little bit of fear
Mhm.
that perhaps this wasn't going to be the same. I didn't get to experience gradual blood pressure spikes the first time. It was normal. Now you're about to die.
Right.
This time I got to see the walk up of the blood pressures. I got to see the actual subtle signs of preeclampsia. So I was actually documenting what I was feeling. I also had something called a remote blood pressure cuff, which I have advocated on Capitol Hill for. Everyone should have. My numbers were automatically transposed into my chart. I didn't have to remember them, I didn't have to write them down.
Wow.
My team could see in real time what my numbers were like. And so they were taking the journey with me, and it was easy to make the call to get on medicine to control my blood pressure. It was easy because they were on the journey with me, and it was well until it wasn't at 29 weeks when I had to be admitted. So,
So admitted at 29 weeks,
yeah.
and what happened from there?
So I got admitted because I went in for an ultrasound and they realized that my son's heart rate was having decelerations.
Yeah.
And so they sent me for a stress test with ultrasound and they noticed some cord flow issues. And so they then sent me for a full body scan for him. And we realized that he was not growing from the last scan. They actually put him in the sixth percentile. And so it was like, whoa, what just happened? In a month, we went from okay. Literally 4 weeks before that, he was measuring 2 pounds, 10 ounces to come back a month later, and he's still 2 pounds, 10 ounces, despite getting longer. But he was still the same weight. His head and his body, I think his head was in like the 80th percentile, and then his body was super small. And so they were telling me that this kind of asymmetrical growth restriction is pretty common for preeclampsia for cord issues. And so they admitted me to the hospital. It was supposed to be a 24-hour admission to just watch his decelerations, but the decelerations got extreme. His heart rate would go from 160s, 170s down to the 50s. I
Ooh,
can't tell you how many times they ran into my room like crash C-section ready.
wow.
And so they were like, you're going to have to stay here. We're going to give you a chance to stay pregnant. We're not in a rush to deliver you because he does come back up within about 30 seconds, but you can't go home. There's no way we can send you home in good conscience. And so I knew I would have to stay. And so the goal was to stay to make it to 32 weeks. That was the goal. If I made it to 32 weeks and we were still, having decelerations, and he was doing well, they may consider sending me home or they may decide to deliver. We would just have to see. And so I was in the hospital from 29 weeks to 31 weeks, dealing with what I went from high blood pressures. Then they gave me too much medicine and then it tanked. Growth restriction, watching him. It was like one long doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
I rarely
Yeah.
rested because they were constantly looking at his cord flow, constantly literally one day I had 4 ultrasounds in one day.
Wow.
But the great thing was, as a mom, was I finally got that 3D ultrasound of his face that I wanted. And so I just had to take the little wins in there. I was
Yeah.
away from my daughter who was in school. That was tough. They had transferred me to a location that was about 75 minutes away because that new hospital, their NICU, was not set up to accommodate babies under 32 weeks. And so, just in case, they transferred me to the other location. Though very far away from home, it happened to be in my hometown where my
Hmm.
family is.
Wow.
So that was beautiful that my family could get to me quickly, be there with me. And so the village stepped up. The village
Right.
stepped up. They helped with my daughter. She was still in school. So my husband would, get her from school. They'd come to Baltimore. They'd come see me and, everything was okay.
Yeah.
I woke up on the day that I turned 31 weeks and I felt off, very off. A doctor came in, we were having just a regular smuggler conversation, and he just said, you don't look good. I said, honestly, I don't feel good. I feel sluggish. I said, I have like a vest on my chest. Like it is taking so much work for me to take a deep breath. I don't feel short of breath, but I feel like I'm working harder. And so he listened, and then he had his resident listen, and he was like, "Do you hear that?" And she was like, "Yeah, that's rails. That's congestion." And I was like, "So I have a cold? What do you mean?" And he
Yeah.
said, "No, we hear fluid moving when you're breathing. That's why you're having a hard time." So he's like, "Let's just put you on a little bit of oxygen, see how you feel." Okay. So he's like, "Let me examine you." And when he laid me back, the monitor went off that my oxygen was dropping. And then it triggered the memory
Mm.
with my daughter being in the ER, laying back and not being able to breathe. So he sat me back up, he poked around, and when he touched the upper right side of my stomach, I winced in pain. And his eyes got big and he said, "Let's get an ultrasound." I was like, "Okay." And he said, "No, of your liver. I need to see your liver." I said, "Okay." My husband is a minister. He had to preach the next day. This is the day before Good Friday. Those who are Christians know it's like the Super Bowl. That Easter weekend is like the Super Bowl of Christianity. So he's headed home to prepare for this sermon. And I said my goodbyes to him. He went home and I was like, "I'll call you later." And not even 10 minutes after he left, the ultrasound tech comes in. She's looking. And as she's pushing, I can't take the pain. I start getting nauseous. I start vomiting. And the doctors looked at each other and he said, "Let's just do some stat blood work. Let's just see what's going on." Stat blood work. I don't even think it was 10 minutes. It could just be my memory, but I remember it being very quick. It was before the ultrasound tech was done for sure. And he said, "I don't like where this is going. I don't like where this is going at all. Your liver looks very, very enlarged. You have fluid on your lungs. Your blood pressure at this point, it was hovering around like 170 over 100. He's like, we're throwing all the meds at you. Your son's heart rate is doing a little bit better, but the dips are getting more dramatic." He said, "I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And I feel like you're headed towards HELP syndrome. Call your husband. Tell him to get back here.
Oh,
You're
man.
going to the OR now." So at 31 weeks exactly, we began the process to deliver my son. And within 15 minutes, I was getting an epidural. And my husband was running back in the door to get dressed for a C-section.
Jesus.
Yeah. So we thought back to what's the worst that could happen. My husband and I were prepared for the worst.
Right.
In this moment, although it wasn't what we wanted full term. We wanted at minimum 32 weeks. I wasn't on life support. I wasn't fighting for my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to advocate for myself.
Yeah. And you were
They
awake. I
advocated
mean, you
for
were
me,
awake. Like,
and I was awake. They advocated for me. The doctor advocated for me. I was begging them to give me more time. "Keep him in there. Keep him in." And they're like, "No, you got steroids 2 days ago. He has lung steroids. At this point, he can probably breathe on his own. No, we have to take him. We cannot risk that happening because you may not recover this time." And so my son Roland, on April 6th, 2023, was born, weighing 2 pounds, 13.8 ounces, screaming, breathing on his own, needing no assistance. Tiny, but very mighty. Very much a 31 weeker in his physiology, although tiny. And he went off to the NICU. I got to see him. I was awake for the entire C-section. He went off to the NICU. I went off to the PACU to recover. And I actually met my son the same day I had him.
wow. It's Ebony, your like perspective on this is so skewed given your previous experience. Whereas, like, for some people, this would have broken them and been just so traumatizing. And it is still traumatizing relative to what you experienced before. It was like, oh, this is ideal. This is a dream. I'm awake. I can
Yeah.
recover. I get to see my son. And again, confidence. I would imagine you also had the confidence that he would be okay because you had seen your daughter as a micro preemie
Mm-hmm.
do and flourish to a healthy child, that like the fear of the future wasn't as pronounced. Is that a fair
Yeah,
assumption?
absolutely. And I knew what a 31 weeker looked like. I knew what a
Right.
31 weeker could do,
Right.
not just because of her experience, but because by this point, I had almost 5 years of experience doing peer mentoring in the NICU. So I knew I stood by mothers of 30 weekers and 31 weekers. I knew
Right.
what to expect. And so that gave me peace, knowing that he wouldn't need to be intubated and all the oxygen
Yeah.
steps that he would be eating in about a week or two. Like I knew what to expect. And so that gave me peace.
So, Ebony, one would think, okay, well, certainly God is done putting me through all these trials and tribulations.
Mhm.
I've got my two children home. And you could go back to not just, but being an advocate and doing all the wonderful work you're doing. And God said, hold on 1 second. I have one more thing I want to throw at you. Why don't you share what then transpired from there?
Sure. So After 6 weeks, my son came home from the NICU. He was 4 pounds on the dot. Tiny, but amazing, healthy, no issues. And we went on to begin our life as a family of four. My daughter just got an autism diagnosis, so we were navigating that, and life was great. That was in March that my son came home. Thanksgiving. My husband woke up with a headache. Standard headache. I'll take some Tylenol and go on about my day. It helps for context to know that my husband has a bleeding disorder called hemophilia B. He has severe hemophilia B. Hemophilia, in short, is where you are born without the factors that help your blood to clot. So you have to take medication to help your blood clot as it should.
Mm,
And so it runs in his family. They knew he had it since he was about 18 months old. And he had a brain bleed when he was 18 months old that led to a stroke. They said all kind of terrible things. He recovered amazingly. He had another incident in, I can't remember the year, but he was like 19 or 20. They gave him medicine. He had just a little spot of blood on his brain, gave him medicine. He was great. When our daughter was about a year and a half, he had another incident, little spot of blood on his brain, gave him medicine. He was home in 24 hours. Everything was great. And so when he got a headache, I immediately was like, oh man, please don't let this be a brain bleed. And he seemed okay. I didn't hear him complaining anymore. We got through Thanksgiving. The next day, actually, rather the next night, I heard him vomiting in the bathroom. And I got nervous because my husband doesn't get sick. And headache and vomiting said to me, oh God, we probably have a brain bleed. And so when he came out, I said, do you think you have a brain bleed? And he said, yeah, I think I do. All they do is give me more medicine. I'm just going to take more medicine and I'm going to lay down. So, okay. It was Saturday night. So, all right. Lay down. We got up the next morning and he could barely open his eyes. I could tell it was paining him to open his eyes. And
mm,
I said, okay, I'm not really comfortable with this. You need to go to the hospital. Mind you, he's a musician. So he was due to play for two churches that morning. The first church was an early service. I demanded he call out. And so he called out. The second service, there was nothing, no one to replace him. And so we went, we did it. But I immediately pulled the plug after he did his part. Like, we need to go. We need to go home. And so for the next few hours, I begged him to go to the emergency room. Begged him, please just go, just go, just go. I know you don't want to be admitted, but let's just get it over with because you're not getting any better. Finally, around 6 p.m. that night, I convinced him to go. I was getting my daughter ready for school. Infant was in the tub. And I'm like, take an Uber. You don't need to drive. Go. He said, okay, I'm going to go. Grabbed his stuff and he went. I'm waiting for a call. We're talking while he's in the waiting room waiting. Everything's great. He texted me and said, hey, I'm headed to the back. Then he texted me and said, hey, I'm headed to CT scan. Okay. Putting the babies in the bed. I remember I was sitting down at my kitchen table. I was doing my homework and the phone rang. And I picked up and it wasn't his voice. It was the voice of a woman. And she said, hi, my name is Dr. So-and-so. Is this Mrs. Ford? Yes, it is. And she says, your husband's really sick. I said, what do you mean he's really sick? I just talked to him. And she said, your husband's brain is bleeding. I said, yeah, I figured that. And she said, no, this isn't like the other bleeds. He's bleeding into his spinal cord. She said, I need to crack his skull immediately. And I need your permission. And I'm like, crack his wait, what do you mean crack his skull? Did you guys give him medicine and he's fine? And I'm going through all the instances of all the bleeds, and she's like, this is not that. This is not that. She said, and I will call you back and I will explain it in depth. But right now, we are losing precious time. She said, I need to crack his skull. So I began giving all of these clearances over the phone for them to do all these different things, anesthesia. Then the ICU doctor called. It was like one after another. Everybody started calling. And when the phone stopped, it finally sank in. My husband's getting ready to have brain surgery. What in the world? We were just sitting at the Thanksgiving table together, normal,
jeez.
and he always having brain surgery. And so hours go by. Of course, I'm not sleeping. And I get a call back telling me that he made it through surgery. He's headed to the ICU, that they could not put his skull back on because his brain was so swollen, and that he's going to remain on all the life support stuff for some time. And then they'll see if they can put it back on, that I can visit in the morning.
Jeez.
And
Huh.
I lost it. I lost it. I remember just falling in my living room floor and just screaming because how did we get here? And I'll fast forward a bit. That next morning, I decided to send my daughter to school to give her some normalcy. I didn't want her sitting in the hospital with me. So I got her on the bus, and as I'm getting her on the bus, I get another call, and they're saying, "Hey, his brain is bleeding again. We got to go back in. We need your permission again. And I said, do what you have to do. And she said, Mrs. Ford, I can't make any promises, but I'm going to try to save his life. I
And
said, what do you mean you're going to try to save his life? You saved his life. She said, no, we can't do this again. If he bleeds after this, there's nothing we can do. I push my daughter on the bus. I run in the house, scream, cry, get my son together. We get our things. We go to the
okay.
hospital. He's coming out of surgery. He's settled in the room, and I walk in to see a man that I do not recognize. His head is swollen beyond recognition, staples all down his head, drains everywhere, blood all behind. He's literally bleeding out of the staples. He's bleeding into a bag. And I'm just like, how? They had a chaplain there ready to receive me. Doctors were there. Everybody was ready. I think they called. They knew
Oh,
I was coming up. So everybody was in the room. So I really couldn't even focus on him because I had a whole team waiting to greet me. And so after a few minutes with him, they took me into a conference room and sat me down. And they were like, so we lifted sedation, which we did last night, and we would get him to give us thumbs up on both sides. Your husband can't give us a thumbs up on his left side. And we suspect that because of all the bleeding, he's had a stroke. She said, we will confirm it in a few days, but we're pretty sure he's had a stroke. I said, okay, we can live with a stroke. We can live with that. What else are we doing? What are we doing about the bleeding? And so that's when the advocacy comes back up. And I advocated for a medicine that he had once been on. We learned that this whole thing was happening. It was linked to a particular vaccine that he had gotten, which caused him to bleed and his medicine not to work. And so we were going through all of that. And those next few days, I kept hearing that my husband only had a 17% chance of survival.
please.
I barely left the hospital. I mean, I literally went home to get my daughter in bed, school, and I was right back there.
Mm,
11 long months in the hospital. 11 long months of tracheostomies, feeding tubes, him not being able to talk, him being unconscious for 4 weeks. My daughter missing her father, not knowing why she can't see her father because I just didn't think it was wise at that time.
mm,
Holidays, Christmas without our son's first Christmas without his father. Whew. Hardest thing I've ever done
mm.
was to keep looking doctors in the face, convincing them that my husband's life was worth saving. Every day I would go in and I would lay my son, who was about 6 months at this point, I would lay him on the bed and I would put my husband's arm around him. And the day he woke up because my son like rolled. He tried to roll and my husband like jumped like he was trying to catch him. And I ran out like, oh, he's waking up, he's waking up, he's moving, he's moving, he's moving. And so they came in and they're like, Ryan, can you do this? Can you do this? And he started responding to the commands. He started giving a thumbs up. He started moving his arm. He started shaking his head.
Oh,
His left side was still not functioning, but he was able to do the commands because the fear was his brain was so damaged, he wouldn't even have cognition of what was happening. The right side of his brain, he actually had 3 strokes, it turns out. And so that whole right side was just completely atrophied, is the way that they explained it. But over 11 months, physical therapy, feeding therapy, speech therapy, over 67 rehab denials. No rehab on the East Coast would take my husband because they don't take patients who take IV medication, and there is no pill for hemophilia. All the medicines are IV because it's a blood condition.
yeah.
I ended up having to write to the FDA for compassionate use for a new medicine that was coming out that was subcutaneous. Again, a lot of advocacy, day and night, calls, letters, emails. They finally granted my husband compassionate use. And because of that medicine, he was able to finally go to rehab for 8 months. And he came home to us. Not the man that he was, paralyzed on his left side, but talking, trach out, feeding tube out. I had to learn how to transfer him in and out of bed. I had to learn to change him. All of those in sickness and in health things that we think don't come until we're 70 or 80 years old came to me at 37.
Wow.
And so here we are, 2.5 years later. He is still fighting for his mobility. He is at home. He is active, with his children as much as he can be. Mentally, he's about 85% of the man that he was, which is all we could pray for because we were told to expect nothing. His
Wow.
memory is better than mine when it comes to things of the past. Short term, still a little iffy, but I'm still advocating for him to get some of the things that he needs to have the best quality of life that he can have. And we're still fighting for that left side to wake up. And so I thought the journey was over with the NICU, but
It's like such a miracle. What is his attitude like? What is his spirit like? Like day to day, how does he approach life? How does he approach the struggles?
I won't say every day. I'll say every few months has a different ring to it. But right now, he is fighting so hard every day to just show up in the ways that he can show up.
Yeah.
You have to understand, this is a man who never let me stay up at night with an infant. When people talk about the infant trenches, I can't relate because my husband kept my son in the living room so that I could sleep, so that I could pump. He still got up in the morning. He did my daughter's hair. He put her on the bus. He came home early to get her off the bus. This is a man that went out of his way to make motherhood easy for me. This is a man who made me stay home and put me through school, who financed my nonprofit and all of my ideas. And so for him to be in a position where he can't be the breadwinner, where he can't do all of the things, it's really tough for him.
Yeah.
But every day he wakes up and does the best that he can. He asks, about our daughter. He helps her with her sight words. I take my son into the room. He and my son don't have the closest relationship because he was gone so long. He missed my son's infancy. He missed really the first 2 years. Although we were visiting, it's not the same
Yeah.
thing. And then my son equates seeing his father with being confined. So at the hospital, my son had to be in a car seat or in a stroller. He couldn't roam until he started walking. And then even then that was limited, which caused developmental delays for my son.
Right.
So we're still kind of navigating all of the delays that come with my son. And while managing, my husband fighting for recovery, but he is positive and he is hopeful and he is fighting. He is fighting like hell to get back to his family in the way that he would like to get back to his family. And so every day we encourage him to just do his best, continue to wake up, continue to fight. And I'm handling all of the advocacy stuff, the doctor's appointments, the therapies. He has a full-time aide. So I handle all of that stuff. But his job is just to recover and get better. And he's doing a great job at it.
Ebony, how the hell do you do it? How do you be his caregiver while also being the caregiver to these young children that need you, that want you involved, maybe even more so because of your husband's condition? I mean, how do you actually manage all of these things?
I wish I had $1 for every time I was asked that. But by the grace of God. But by the grace of God. Some days I wake up and I have nothing for anyone. But somehow strength finds me. I get up, I get my daughter ready for school. My son wakes up and I do the things. And as I go, the strength comes to get it done. It is exhausting. It is heavy. Having three people need you 24/7.
Yeah.
Being away from my family makes it even harder. He has some family here, but I'm carrying this.
What role, if at all, has community played for you all? Friends and family, stepping up, not stepping up? What has that been like for you?
So I've learned a lesson through all of this, and that is that community is not always built of those that you can touch. Some of the strongest pillars of my in my community, I have never hugged, I've never touched. Online community is such a powerful thing. I have a nonprofit called Miracle Mamas, and I run support groups, not just for Miracle Mamas, but for another hospital. And those families rallied around me. When I had to take off a few weeks, they were reaching and calling. I was opening my door to cases of diapers, wipes. My son wasn't even on formula. We'll say formula. Clothes. Oh God. Things for my daughter, toys for my daughter. We were so blessed because of that online community. The gospel community. My husband's a gospel singer. He's a musician. They band together. They did a benefit concert, raised money. My rent was paid for like 5 months. so that all I had to do was just concentrate on my husband. And so at the beginning, there was a lot of support. What I've learned is that as you go on, life goes on. People go back to life, but that doesn't stop the needs that you have. And so the community that supports me emotionally is incredible. I have a whole sisterhood that I can call at any minute, and they have their own things. We connected because we have preemies, because we have disabled children, but we are able to share and be there for one another. And so I would have made it through this without community.
Yeah.
Even in the moments where I still feel like really alone in this, I have to be reminded my community's not sitting next to me, but they're waiting for my call. They're waiting for my text, or they're going to text me, or they're going to call me. They're asking what they can. If I've heard, I mean, literally every day, at least one person says, "Oh, I wish I was closer so I could babysit. I wish I was closer so I could wash your clothes. I wish I could do that. Can I send you a DoorDash?" My community loves to send DoorDash cards or Uber Eats cards, which is super helpful to not have to cook, or they send groceries when they can. Like those things are so valuable and so helpful because again, I went from being a stay-at-home mom with little to no income to now having to be the breadwinner and not working like a formal job.
Right.
So we don't know, sometimes where things are coming from, but it always shows up. And I owe that, of course, to God, but also to the community that He gave us.
Yeah. And it's also just such a powerful reminder that we see this arc happen a lot where the moment of crisis, there's that stampede of support.
Hmm.
It can be overwhelming, it can be very helpful. It's like a lot of things. There's multiple things can be true at the same time, and that there's a tendency for support to wane when the immediacy of the moment of the trauma begins to fade.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, and I think this is super important, is that just because you may not see it or it may not be as present in maybe the way that you're talking about it, whether that's face to face, on social, etc., it doesn't mean that the needs aren't there.
Right.
It may look different, and maybe your tone and the way that you're able to handle it is now different than when it first happened. And there's a little bit more natural panic and shock that you're experiencing. And so, through all of this, I think there's so many great lessons in this, which is one, just do the thing, right? You've talked about this, like don't offer, just do it. Don't wait for permission to send something or to come over. Like if you have an idea, if you have an instinct of what you can do to support, just do it because you're probably not in a
Yeah.
place to have the capacity to say yes or no or to give direction.
Yeah.
And just because you may not know an update day to day, hour to hour like you once did, doesn't mean there's not needs.
Right.
There's still needs.
Yeah.
Ebony, as we wrap up, I do hope there's opportunity for us to continue to collaborate and find ways to for whether it's through support now or otherwise, just for your community to know that there are consistent ways of showing up for you. You more than deserve it. Your husband and your children more than deserve it. And you're such a light because you have, through all of this, still found a way to give back to your community at the same time that you're receiving from your community. You haven't waited to say, okay, well, in a different time, in a different chapter, then I'll give it back. No, you have found a way to intertwine your life of challenge and pain and trauma with also finding ways of taking all of that and just pouring it right back into the communities you know and love and serve them so well. It's really inspiring. It genuinely is so inspiring. And I just want to say thank you for sharing everything, for being so honest. You're so easy to cheer for, Ebony. And
Mm.
you have a forever fan in me that will be looking for ways to support you further as well.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. And what you're doing is amazing. I told you this behind the scenes. I wish I would have known about support now when this first happened because it would have been amazing. Because you're trying to remember everybody's saying what they want to do or what they can do. You're trying to organize and I just tell people do what you would want someone to do for you. Don't bombard the person with 1,000 questions. If you think you would want groceries, just order it. And if you don't know what to order, send a gift card for it. Like, just do it. Don't wait for the call me if you need something because the call's never going to come. They're overwhelmed. They have a lot going on. And sometimes you don't even know what you need. And so things like support now really just take the guesswork out.
Yeah.
It's easy to show up. And so thank you for what you are doing. It is incredible and it makes it very possible for people who feel like I don't even know what I could do in this situation. it gives them options. It takes the guesswork out. This is how you can show up for a family.
Thank you.
And so I often tell people I may have drowned, I may be drowning over here, but I survived over there. So I can tread water here, but I can show you how to survive over there. And so that's why advocacy keeps me going. It fuels me because I've already done the NICU. I can tell you how to get through that. I've done 11 months in the hospital. I can tell you how to get through that. Now, where I am right now, mm, but that I know how to do that. Let me help you through that. You don't have to drown. I got you.
I
And
love that.
so advocacy keeps me going. It literally it drives me to get out of the bed every day, along with my family, of course.
Of course. Ebony, thank you again for joining us. Again, part 2 was just as wonderful as part 1. For those that haven't listened to part 1, I encourage you to go back and listen. And Ebony, look forward to future conversations with you.
Of course. Thanks for having me again.